Gonna do a really big sniff now that we hit record.
Need a sniff.
My nose gets so runny when I like start on Zoom and I don't know why.
I think it's like your body's getting ready to like release something, you know? Well, thank you so much, Jennifer, for being on Awaken and Align. I just love your Instagram, and I'm so excited to find out more about you and your story.
Thanks so much for having me. Yeah, it's good to be here.
I would love for you to share your origin story. It's kind of how I always begin every episode because I feel it's very important to understand someone's history and where they came from so that we understand who you are joining us here today. And you could take
Yeah.
this as far back or as recent as you want.
Okay. Yeah. I'll just start where I currently am and then maybe go back. I'm currently in so-called northern New Mexico. I've been here for like a year and a half now. I lived in New York City for 16 years and left in the fall of 2020. And yeah, my origin story is long and winding, like a lot of people's, I think. I guess I'll start where I found like healing work. I'm a survivor of multiple forms of violence from childhood through adulthood, and in my early mid 20s, I started doing. I just wanted to be of service because I was struggling so much too with my own history of like abuse that I had experienced, and so I started doing anti-violence work, and I started training um, in as a rape crisis counselor in an emergency room in New York City. So I was like on call overnight when people were coming in after a horrific experience. And from there, I was just kind of moved more towards into anti-violence work. I did some community organizing work in New York City around sexual violence in our communities and like what it looks like, who's being impacted. But along the way, I found myself in spaces where I was like, we aren't looking at the whole picture. Like a lot of what I call like more mainstream anti-sexual violence work is still very much focused on the singular narrative of like often like a cisgender, white, straight woman survivor. And, for me, for a lot of people in my life, it just wasn't resonating and it wasn't calling in, a fuller experience of what sexual violence and trauma looks like. So I left that work to edit an anthology called Queering Sexual Violence. It came out in 2016 and it's 35 plus queer and trans and non-binary survivors of sexual violence across all kinds of different identities, race, class. I really, of course, no book is fully inclusive of everybody, but I really wanted a resource for those of us that were queer and trans and just navigating different margins of identity. And from there, I started realizing like I wanted to do a lot more healing work for myself around the violence I'd experienced. So I found, lots of different tools. I started studying herbalism. I started studying breath work. I went back to school. I went to grad school and studied. I went to a very cool kind of like independent program at Goddard College, and we got to just create our whole curriculum. So I studied, again, like queer, trans, LGBTQ people, and violence and healing, like what it looks like from the outside of these kinds of more mainstream spaces. Um, yeah, so I just kind of kept following that and then came into work with psychedelics that was really transformative in my healing. Years of therapy, somatic therapy, all kinds of stuff, and all with the hope of like just shifting how I felt in the world. I was really, struggling with complex PTSD and depression and anxiety. And I also want to say, like, all of those things still exist in my life. I don't think anything has like taken away everything. And I don't know that I would want it to. So there are practices that I just stay engaged with and support myself through. And alongside that, I started realizing that instead of being, in community organizing or in like nonprofit work or even a therapist role, I actually wanted to be working in the healing process with people and creating spaces that more of us felt safe in. I know that's like a loaded word and it's not something I ever promised, but I think that we can do work to create safer spaces. So yeah, I started sharing herbalism and I was doing a lot of writing workshops focused on trauma, navigating the aftermath or the ongoing impact of trauma through writing, and then breath work too. So now that's what my practice looks like. It's kind of writing, breath work, and herbalism wrapped up together.
Hmm. Thank you so much for sharing your story. That
Yeah.
you said so much there where I can like go in any direction. But first, I want to say your background is like an apothecary's dream or an
Yeah.
herbalist's dream. And
So,
I'm like, what do you got back there?
so many things, lots and lots and lots of tinctures.
I'm gonna have to go visit you because I'm kind of curious because you've lived in New York City for 16 years, and I'm a born and bred New Yorker. What was it? The panorama that made you leave?
It was a mix. I think that for like a lot of people who have lived in New York or born and raised, like there's always maybe this, I don't know if this is your experience, but there's always like, we're always like, oh, what about I could move here? I could be, there's like the idea of living somewhere else. And I think, the deeper that I got into herb work, especially, the more that I just wanted to be immersed in plants more. I wanted to be able to grow more. I was always growing on my fire escape and, things like that. But it was different. It was different than what I needed, I think. And, like a lot of people in New York City, I think that we find ways to make it work, and it's a hard city. It's a hard city to live in. It's a hard city to survive in sometimes. And when the pandemic hit, a few months prior, my girlfriend and I had been considering moving in the next few years. But I was like, no, my work's here. I have all these spaces. I've like got long-term relationships with people that I have long-term relationships with. And that all fell away when the pandemic hit. So, you know, all of these, all but one incredible space that I worked out of is still open and is opening back up. It's called Heal House. I don't know if you're familiar with
Yes, I
it.
do.
So that was like the only place that I worked out of that managed to carry through. And I think it offered me more choices, because I was like, okay, so everywhere that I work is closed except for one. And, I had been doing some virtual work with people already, breath work and herbalism, but I had never really gone like 100%. So the pandemic kind of forced me to.
Mhm.
And then I saw that it was possible. So I think, leaving New York City, it was really for a whole host of reasons. And I think, some of the narratives that have come out of the pandemic around New York City was like everyone who left was just like rich and moved to their second house. And I was like, some of us left because we had to, like I lived in like a teeny apartment. I loved it. It was fine for me because I was out of it a lot. And then all of a sudden I was just in it all the time and working all the time. And I also knew that it wasn't going to be a quick thing, like I was not like, oh, 2 weeks, we're going to be back at it. I was like, it's going to be a minute. So yeah, we just kind of took a leap and, you know, there are many reasons it was possible. And we moved out to a very rural old adobe farmhouse. And yeah, we're just kind of taking it day by day. I don't know, like I feel like there's not a lot happening in the world that makes me feel like
Mhm.
solid anywhere. So I think we're just kind of seeing what it feels like for a couple of years here. And yeah, hoping to come back to New York more though, because I haven't really been able to yet.
Well, I definitely feel like whatever you're doing is working for you because I see the things you're growing and the things that you're cultivating on your little land there. And it just,
Yeah.
I don't know, like, again, like I don't know you, but I just get this warm, fuzzy feeling when I tune into your energy and I see what you write. And um, And I appreciate so much of how you take care in the words that you write and how you tackle
Mm,
such sensitive topics like trauma, um, which is, I want to lead into from the panini to the trauma, because it's become such a trending word now, since so many people have been experienced. I mean, we've all experienced trauma
yeah.
collectively together, but I think it's shown a spotlight onto our own trauma, intergenerationally,
Mhm.
ancestrally, our own personal ones. And I love that you speak about it in terms of it's not only an individual healing endeavor, but it's a
Yeah.
collective endeavor. So can you please speak to like what you've seen, the conversation around trauma, and how maybe the unwell community is doing it wrong, or
Yeah. I mean, I think, yeah, it is a word that has like really exploded in the last couple years. If you're on Instagram at least and you're in the like healing arts, spiritual spaces, you can see it a lot. And I think that there's like a lot of value in normalizing it and like reminding people that like most likely all of us have experienced trauma in some capacity in our lives. And certainly the pandemic has been traumatic for all kinds of reasons for people. And also like we're all impacted differently. You know, some people maybe don't think that they're as impacted by trauma as other people, and it could be very true. And I think that there's a value in like normalizing it and kind of like putting a large swath over it. And also it's such an individual experience sometimes, and it's so varied that I feel like we lose a lot of the nuance in the conversation. And I think in general, like social media is great for so many reasons, but it flattens so many conversations, and it, you know, we got to like get them down into like a couple paragraphs on on a post, which cannot fully encompass trauma at all. And I think, you know, I see a lot of new trauma healers and trauma coaches. And I think that that's great. And also, it's so often coupled in this really capitalistic idea where, yes, we should be offering more services to survivors of trauma and violence and all the different kinds of trauma that we experience. But like, what are we doing when people can't access it? You know, when people can't access that level of care or support. So yeah, I think it's a tricky topic because I think that, again, like coming back to, yeah, the panini, it's like some, I remember at the beginning of it, you know, I've experienced a lot of shit, a lot of violence. I've experienced sexual violence, I've experienced physical violence, relationship violence. And I just remember being at the beginning of the pandemic and just feeling how activated I was and how triggered I was. And I was just like, whoa, like it was the first time that I felt like I really had the ability to look at what was happening to me personally and be like, oh, that's trauma. You know, like I am being impacted right now and I'm feeling it in my body. I'm seeing it in my behaviors. And what I think was hard for so many of us is that we lost a lot of our access to spaces where we might process or move through, you know, like therapists went online. We lost healing art spaces. We lost, you know, our day-to-day connecting in a lot of our relationships. And instead we were just like in like like a container of trauma, you
yeah.
know? And it's just, I just was like, oh God, there's gonna be like so much to address
Mhm.
when and if we ever come out of this experience, and knowing of course that it's forever changed our world and changed us. And yeah, I had and I have a lot of fears about what's just not being supported in people, you know, like who isn't able to access the care they need.
Mhm.
It's a lot to navigate. And you know, and then like life continues. It's like the amount of horrific things that have happened to people in my life very close to me, I mean, including myself. I had like a terrible situation in the fall where my dog died suddenly. I fell on the stairs. I broke my foot. I had to get surgery. The hospitals were a mess. You know what I mean? Like the
Uh-huh.
surgery was traumatic. And I was just like, okay, just put it on the pile, I guess. It's like, What do we do? So yeah, there's just so much of it. And I don't know that, you know, I'll just say US culture for now, but like I don't know that like US culture has a great grasp on trauma at all, you know,
No.
like at all. So we're like kind of fucked because the spaces we need just don't exist. We get re-traumatized in so many different medical spaces and therapeutic spaces. And it's, I don't know. Sorry, it was like a very downer
No,
answer.
I agree because I think you were around New York City for 9/11, right? Yeah, me
I
too.
got there right after. I
Oh,
was
right
like the year
after.
after. Yeah.
I'm still processing my trauma from 9/11. I
Yeah.
feel like we all went through that in New York City, and then it was like, okay, business as usual. We're going
Yep.
to war, and we're going to a war that, like it was all so confusing at the time, and we just kept going and going and going. And what you said about capitalism too, and how we get distracted and things move so quickly that you don't have time to like process what really
Yeah.
happened.
Yep.
And I feel like we're still in a panini. And then now there's like, obviously, there's a spotlight on Ukraine, but there's like other wars going on in other places in the
So
world that
many.
don't get like the spotlight.
So many that the US is very complicit in.
Very, oh, talk about censorship. That's a whole different discussion. And then the last 4 years of the orange Cheeto, it's like we haven't been able to like heal
Mm-mm.
together and fully like I've never been to AA, but I know one of the first steps is like admitting that you have a problem.
Yeah.
And it's like, when are we ever going to admit that we have a problem here?
Yeah. 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 I know. It's really like it's just, I mean, I sit around a lot and I'm like, is this just life? Like, I guess this is life, you know, just kind of one traumatic experience after another that we are navigating, but doesn't feel sustainable, you know, like not for like any sort of like, I don't know, capacity for being in the world more fully. It's just a lot to navigate.
Right. So to not, like you said, which resonated so deeply in my like body was, it's not that you ever fully get rid of the trauma because it's almost like epigenetically imprinted sometimes in our body, even from our ancestors, but then
Mm-hmm.
our own, right? That we carry around. But to mitigate some of the traumatic effects is,
Mm-hmm.
I guess you use herbs and breath work to like help you ease the pain. So can you talk more about that?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that there are a lot of practitioners, people in the world doing trauma work where, yeah, the goal is to get rid of the experience, the negative experience, the negative trait, whatever is going on. And I think part of what's been important for me in my own process is like accepting what the impact has been on me, and also like finding the usefulness in the ways that I am now, you know? And I think for me, like, because I experienced abuse in childhood and then in young adulthood and then in adulthood, my body had adjusted to the idea that like violence was inevitable. And it helped fuel a lot of my work because I think, I work, and my community is mostly like queer, trans, BIPOC, disabled, sex worker community. And for a lot of us, like the violence doesn't end, like the violence continues in the day to day. And so if we're continuing to be experiencing traumatic things or traumatic language or violent anything in the world, like we're not gonna, like we don't live in some pristine, beautiful world where like there's no issues, so we're going to continue to be impacted by violence.
Mhm.
And so for me, a lot of my work has just become like harm reduction work, like, okay, we live in a racist, transphobic, homophobic, all the things world, and we have to find ways to survive in it and thrive ideally too. So, the work that I do is not, yeah, it's not about just like pretending that the things didn't happen, pretending that we haven't been impacted deeply. It's about like naming the things that happened and fully understanding the impact they've had on us and being like, okay, so what do we do now? You know, how do we move through this? You know, an example from my own life is in my 20s and early 30s, I drank a lot. And, you know, I think while I was drinking a lot, I didn't have the full awareness of the why, you know, and when I started doing more work around that, you know, both by necessity and just also desire to at a certain point, I part of that work was coming into psychedelic work and working with some plant medicines in like, you know, controlled, contained, therapeutic, guided spaces. And that was really the first time that I got to feel into like how deeply impacted I was by the violence that I had experienced. And coming out of that, it wasn't like I was just like, boom, healed. It was more like, oh, I understand fully why, you know? Like I understand why I am so dissociative and I have issues with drinking and problematic relationships and all the things. And then that was just like a way for me to start working with that stuff, you know, like the really shitty, hard stuff that like, of course we don't want to acknowledge or deal with, but um, and you know, it's like I think with trauma too, you know, there are so many ways that it impacts us. I mentioned dissociation. That's something that I've experienced in pretty profound ways since I was a child, but it's also like dissociation isn't just like a negative trait. It's a profoundly wise way that those of us have found to check out a little bit when we need to. And it can become a tool where we do it too much, you know, but it's not like, it's not just a terrible thing. So like I also had to kind of move back into myself and be like, that kid version of me was really fucking smart, you know, like I found ways to navigate what was not a good space for me as a young person. And I found ways to still like keep myself alive. So, you know, I think that's just a lot of the work that I do with people is like trying to reverse the narratives of like all of these like negative, harmful things that we have experienced and then engage with in the world and remember that like these are also tools and we just have to understand them a bit and why we're using them and how frequently.
Yeah. Oh, I love hearing your personal story because I am also a domestic violence survivor. My sister, my mom, and me, my sister, and my mom um, were victims of domestic violence until we were like until I was in my 20s.
Wow. Yeah.
And a way to disassociate and cope was heavy drinking.
Mhm.
And when I started to not drink, I beat myself up so much about that version of myself that would party and try to like run away from my feelings and just get drunk and like um almost like banish that part of my history out. But then in
Yep.
my healing process, I had to forgive myself that that was the only tool I had at the
Mhm.
time because I didn't find healing yet. I didn't find like somatic work or therapy. I was going
Yeah.
through therapy, but like talk therapy.
Yeah.
And so I had to like, not that drinking heavily was a good thing at all for my body or my mind, but it was almost like a tool for me to help um, numb the pain of the
Yeah.
past.
Yeah.
And I think I loved what you said about that. Like, just not just because it takes a journey to accept what happened, but also
Yeah.
like not hate yourself for the way in which you had
Mhm.
to cope with that.
Yeah. Totally. It's really, I think it's really important because yeah, it's like if you're even if you're and thanks for sharing that too, you know, it's we have some overlap there for sure, but if we're banishing that part of ourselves, it's like that part still needs care, you know? And the part again like we're human bodies. Like that part's not going anywhere. That part's just like hanging out banished in our bodies, like being like, wait, I thought I was helping. So I think, I mean, a lot in breath work, I'm always inviting people to like invite in like every single part of themselves, like even the ones that you hate, the ones that are like causing you problems, because I just think that, yeah, we can't, I mean, that's shadow work too. It's the work of holding the hard stuff in our lives. And also, yeah, like, no, drinking heavily isn't great for a body. And, I mean, I got a DUI, I had to go through all that stuff. And also, it's like, when we're ready to like understand the why, it's right there. You know what I mean? It's like, I could be like, oh yeah, I can tell you all the reasons why now. And, I think at a certain point, it can become like self-punishment too. It's like, I'm less so now, but I was very good at punishing myself. And that's one of the scars of dealing with violence so young, is that like, instead of our caretakers or whoever is causing the harm, instead of them being the like bad ones, not that anyone needs to be the bad one, but like we internalize that as kids because we're like, oh, I must be bad then, if this is happening to me and it just keeps happening to me and I'm being told that I'm bad, that takes so much unlearning to come out of those places in ourselves.
And then also when I had this epiphany when I was young, and like my classmates around me, and me realizing that actually violence wasn't the norm, that like,
Yep.
oh wait, living in fear and your nervous system acting up all the time is not normal
Yeah.
actually. And I
Yeah.
had to like and then as an adult I was so used to that, like adrenaline and the cortisol and the fight or flight mode of
Yeah.
the body, that in 2020, just sitting there, like you said, in all that trauma,
Yep.
I had to like, I had to do that work of not running away because I had
Yeah.
been so used to that, that traumatized, as Eckhart Tolle says, the pain body.
Mm.
And another thing you said really resonated with me, that about the collective, because also there's like a cultural component for me, and there was so much shame around holding the secret in my family, and that
Mm-hmm.
like I didn't want anybody to know that my dad was like a violent person. And even
Mm-hmm.
now I don't like talking about it because it's something that I've already forgiven him about and something that I've like moved past, but it's still a part of my story.
Mm-hmm.
Um but also I don't want people to think badly of my dad, because he's still
Mm-hmm.
alive and I still live with him. And then also a lot of therapists who are more capitalistic, as you said, say things like, well, you have to let go and of your toxic parent, and you have to like love yourself. But
Mm.
that's not actually viable in an Asian culture where it's more collective and community based.
Yeah.
Like we don't just like,
Yeah.
you know, we don't
Yeah.
just like banish somebody because they're bad. And
Yep.
that is also like a cultural, I guess, difference between like the Western therapeutic mindset versus like maybe more collectivist communal
Yeah.
therapeutic perspectives.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, thank you for sharing about it and talking about it, because it is hard to talk about. And I think like it's especially hard to talk about when it's people that we love, and that, I think culturally in the US, I'll just say, because that's where I live and I'm from, and maybe it's true in other places, it's like there is a very like good and bad binary. And it's a lot of what I and other people talked about in the anthology I edited, of just like, the reality is most people are both perpetrator and victim at the same time at different points in our lives. If we look at harm as being on like a full big spectrum, where like certainly there are like egregious harms or maybe violence that we can't forgive people for, and then there's just the violence of the everyday, of like sharp words at somebody, or like war, because war is a violence of the everyday. It is always happening. And I think that, of course we get to make decisions at a certain point if we can't have people in our lives, but we also need to acknowledge when like that's not possible for everybody. And there isn't, I mean, that's again, I think it's the trouble with like these blanket ideas of what trauma is and how we're supposed to respond to it and what healing looks like, because it is different for all of us.
Totally. And we need more nuance. And right now, everyone's focused on the Will Smith, Chris Rock conversation, which overshadowed like all of the momentous like things that happened that night. But I think through my experience and seeing ableism and toxic masculinity and misogynoir, like I can not excuse Will Smith of his act, but I can understand like maybe in which like why he did the thing that he did, and there just
Mhm.
has to be more nuance and not just cancel all the
Mhm.
parties involved.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, yeah, I mean, that moment is like it's just like a microcosm of so many issues that we all live with in the world. And it's been like alarming to see all the side, like this side and that side, and this person's bad and no, this person's the violent one. And I'm like, we all should just look at ourselves a little bit more. You know what I mean? Like, I have been the person throwing the punch. I have been the person punched. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
Those archetypes are all within us.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like sometimes I think celebrities are just like our mythological deities just playing out in real time, and like
Yeah.
those archetypes are within us. So I forget that saying, like you can't call the kettle black. Is that the saying?
Something like that. Yeah. Or
Something like
like
that.
people in glass houses shouldn't throw
Yeah,
stones. Yeah.
yeah. Something
Yeah.
of that nature.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm really interested in your breath work and your writing because I
Mhm.
think that both of them are gateways for healing. Um, can you speak about how you use breath work and writing in your healing services and how you personally work with that?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So over the years, I've offered a number of like multi-week writing workshops. I was offering one for a while called Wound Dwelling, Writing the Survivor Bodies, which was anywhere from like 2 to 6 weeks, depending on where I was doing it. I was able to offer it in like a whole bunch of different spaces. I was at like an LGBTQ center. I was at a harm reduction clinic up in New York City, um, and at first it was just breath work, but it was also involved, like I wanted to bring in some sort of body-based practice. So breath work came in as I was offering them a little bit more, because I think that like I've often used writing for healing. And, like it's something that I've done since I was a kid. It really has been the space where I get to understand myself a bit more. And I think it's like I'm a very heady person. I also have like a lot of air in
Are
my
you a Gemini?
I'm a Libra, but I have a Libra
Oh,
stellium. So it's just like I have a Gemini moon.
oh, that's why we get along. I have
Are
an
you a
Aquarius.
Gemini?
I have an Aquarian moon, so we have moon. The elements are in moon.
Uh-huh. Yeah, so you might relate with the just like constant buzzing in your head all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a thing for me. And I think like getting it on paper, even if it's not, if it changes, like I think that it's the hard thing about writing is like the second we get it on paper, it's no longer, it's different. You know what I mean? It's like it was in here, now it's there. And I think breath work alongside writing has been really useful because it's helped me just get out of my own way in writing a bit more, get out of my story a bit more. I think I believe in like finding story and finding language for the story, for what's happened to us, what's happened to people we love or the world. And then also we can get so like my stories, the roads are very very paved, like I know them like the back of my, they're my life. And I also think that like we get something when we get to move out of what we know about our story. I mean, a great writing practice is thinking of a situation and then writing that story from like 3 different angles, whether it's like past you, present you, future you, or, you know, like let's say you and I had a disagreement. I would write the story of my experience and then I would try to write your story. And I think like doing those kinds of things just gets us out of like,
Mhm.
this is truth, this is fact. And I think that breathwork offers a chance to just like, I mean, not offers, it is a chance to expand our consciousness. So we are, if we're doing breath work first, or, you know, I think any kind of body-based practice can be useful, like some kind of movement practice, somatic practice, meditation, you know, it's a way of just getting some of the crap out of our way a little bit before we dive into something creative. So it's been really cool to offer those kinds of workshops with people.
Mhm.
A dear friend has an organization called Community Building Artworks, and they've been doing free writing workshops online for the last 2 years now, but you know, existed before the pandemic. And I've been able to bring it there too. And so we've been doing like half writing, half breath work. And, you know, it's all with like writers who are used to writing all the time. And it's been cool to hear people being like, wow, I was able to like tap into something a bit different because I did something first, you know, like before I like just like sat down and tried to write cold or something.
Mm.
So yeah, I think they're really beautiful practices together that can be, you know, help us connect to, also like writing is an embodied practice, you know, like we are using our hand, we are using our body to write. We're often writing from our lives or our experience or our bodies. And so to have a practice that is so connected to the body helps us kind of maybe start from that place when we're writing.
Mhm. This is just a side note that kind of makes me a little annoyed and angry. That like, you know, Instagram is now prioritizing reels and like video, like TikTok and YouTube,
Yep.
and we're moving kind of away from writing. Um, and that makes me angry because people don't have the
Yeah.
attention span to read like a caption. I write long captions because I have
Same.
a lot to fucking say.
Me too.
And people will write in my comments like, why do you have to write a TED talk or a novel? And I'm just like, can you give me your like 5 minutes attention just to read like what I have to say and not like, and the algorithm makes each video even shorter and shorter and shorter. It's going from 15 seconds to 7 seconds. It's like
Yeah.
what's gonna happen? We don't even
Yeah.
have the attention span to read words anymore. People
No.
read books.
Yeah. We don't have any like critical thought. I mean, there's a lot that's just like, I really notice it. I really do. I'm with you.
And
Yeah.
even like I look at the captions because I'm such a nerd with words and etymology and like just grammar. Like the way people write their captions, I'm like, do you not know the difference between your apostrophe your and like, oh my God.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. It's like the reels really, I just can't do them. I think it's also like for me, what happens a lot on social media is I think it's so incredible that there is like, you know, free-ish, you know, on Instagram. It's free-ish. If you are a business owner, you don't really get to experience much of the benefits of that. But you know, it's a space where so many people can share how they're feeling, what they're noticing. But yeah, it's like I'm a wordy caption person too. I'm always having to delete to just like be able to post most
Yes.
of the time. And so part of me is like, maybe I just need like a blog or I don't know, you know, but
Yeah.
I worry. I just think that it's like the regurgitation of so much information too, without being sourced or grounded in anything outside of the internet. And also like the celebrity element that comes in too, you know, of just like everybody needing to say something about something and then like building this like pedestal
Mhm.
where they get to like preach from. And it's, I mean, I feel like I've definitely seen it go in terrible ways in the last few years around just like public health and the pandemic and, you know, like quote unquote wellness people sharing far out of their realm of skill or expertise or knowledge base. It's a lot. There's a lot of information. It's
Yeah,
hard.
but honestly, your captions is what made me be like, this is kinship right here.
See, there's
I
some
can
of
get
us
down
out
with,
there that like a long caption.
see, I was like, I can get down with Jennifer. So so keep writing because you will find
Okay.
the people.
It's true. I'm just like, you know what? You don't like my long captions. You can unfollow me. That's how you don't have to read them
You can fuck
anymore.
off,
Yeah.
basically.
I feel sad that people in your comments say that. That I don't like that at all.
Oh my God. It's been wild because I actually love social media. I have an Aquarian moon Venus and I thrive on the internet. But every now and then I get this annoying fucking troll that has to say something about something I'm doing. And I'm just like, I guess it's just like the nature of this open forum, right?
Yeah.
Free
Yeah.
freedom of speech.
Yeah. But it doesn't feel very good.
No.
Because also it's like most of the time when those happen to me, oftentimes it's like someone who's not even following my account and like
No.
knows nothing about me. And I'm just
No.
like, how have you decided that that's how I feel when you like literally know nothing about me?
And it's always a white man who's probably a
Mm,
cishet white man who cannot handle what I have to say. So
for
it's always
sure.
in my comments like, "Meh."
Yep. Yep. So one place to get it out. Now you know.
I'm like, for people who are who have like the apex of privilege, they're so fragile. I'm just like, damn.
Yeah.
But that's
Yep.
a whole other conversation.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
But what I loved what you said about the regurgitation, that's what I love about all the modalities that you practice because it is a form of channeling something creative that can only come through you.
Mm.
Because,
Hmm.
when you sit with yourself with breath and you tune into your body and you are present with plants that can open you up in a way and you allow yourself to free write, that is
Yeah.
coming from some different source that is not just you read something and you like, repost
Yeah.
something, which I believe our creative capacity to um, create something different and in a way that's beautiful and artistic and true is the way to heal our story and also bring something forth to the collective.
Yep. Totally. It's a really good point because I think that is partially why I've been drawn to all of these modalities just in my own healing is like, I've got I'm sure the wellness people that don't like me will have a heyday, but like I've got an authority complex. It's fine. You know what I mean? Like I don't do well with like like again, like a guru on a pedestal or something like telling I want, and I also don't think that that's how healing happens, to be told to not have agency. And I think like so often in like different unwellness spaces and healing spaces, it's like there is a real power differential depending on so many reasons, on people's identities, people's unchecked privilege, people's um all kinds of things. And I think like the really shitty thing that happens is that when we're in those kinds of spaces and we get hooked up in them, we lose our agency. And like no sustainable healing will come from a place where we don't have our agency anymore. And so like, yeah, breath work, writing, plant medicine work, whether it's like just herbal work or psychedelic work, it's like those are all spaces where, yeah, the information is coming from the inside. And so the understanding is coming from the inside and it's ours. Like breath work, I think is in particular is so incredible because you are using your own breath.
Mhm.
So it is not anything that I am doing to someone. It is not, like, of course, those practices have benefits too, but I think that there's power in being in a practice with yourself and just being like, oh, because like I do think that like that corny phrase of just like the answers are inside, like they kind of are,
Oh my God.
like it kind of,
Yeah.
it's, it's great to have outside feedback and information and all the things, but like we are, what we know about ourselves should be the like the first stop, I think.
Right. And I think you knowing yourself and facilitating and holding space for other people who hold the same identities as you is
Yep.
so important because um, prior to 2020, I was also like in, well, I won't speak for like everybody. I'll just speak for myself, but I was in the space of like a skinny white cis wealthy woman was like Gwyneth Paltrow was like the authority on health and
Yeah.
wellness.
Yep.
So I was like consuming content from a group of people that like did not represent me at all. And
Hmm.
I always felt shitty about that. Like,
Hmm.
oh, I'm not skinny enough, or I don't have this amount of money to do this cleanse, or X, Y, and Z. And then once you realize that and you wake up from that, and as I was sharing with you before we press record, like that was my big awakening of 2020, being like, wait a minute.
Yeah. Yep.
That's our power, really.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I mean, I think that, the norms, the cultural norms that exist outside of the unwellness world get replicated there often, all the time. And to the detriment of so many people, I think that certainly we can learn from each other across identities, but also like not if the political isn't allowed in the space. I think that that's something that, I came into the healing arts world from political spaces, like community organizing work. And like I had like a strong political, like far left view on the world. And coming into those spaces where like so little was allowed, like just about around like acknowledging people's experiences in the world. I mean, you want to talk about trauma, we cannot talk about trauma if we're not going to talk about racial trauma, if we're not going to talk about like the trauma that queer and trans people experience, like, so if I'm going to go into a space that's about like healing my trauma, but we can't even talk about the trauma of the culture that we're steeped in, like how healing is it? It's not healing,
Right.
it's not healing.
Or the politicians that you vote into office that ban saying the word gay, or like
Yeah.
that's what also gets me frustrated. And I'll end at this ranting note. It's that so many of the spiritual and wellness spaces that I used to be in would say don't bring politics into it, and there's
Yep.
nothing more spiritual than politics because
Hmm.
these are the laws that govern our bodies.
Yep. Yep.
So what the
Yep.
fuck, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a red
Yep.
flag for anybody listening when they say
It's a
that.
red
It's
flag.
a red flag.
It's a red flag. Because also there are tons of incredible spaces where like that's valued. You know what I mean? Like, and there's like a depth of understanding and conversation that can happen in spaces where like, I mean, I just think it's so bizarre to like disallow. I've been in plenty of trainings where like and I'm just like, you know what? Like, come on. You're erasing the experiences of so many people in the room. You're actually erasing your own experience too by refusing to, like, we are all navigating it in our own ways. And it's, yeah, I mean, I've been like the last couple of years just seeing so many spiritual leaders, wellness world, white women in particular, like really double down and also like expose their politics. And I'm like, oh, maybe this is why you didn't want politics in the room, because you are actually on the far right. Like
Yeah.
you're racist, you're sharing transphobic memes on the internet, like you are comparing mask wearing to like, Nazi Germany. And I'm just like, not like, this is not, it's not healing. It's
Mhm.
not wellness. It is, now it just feels like it's all about money, which is actually maybe what it was always
It's
about,
always been that, yeah.
Yeah.
I forgot who said this. So many people have said this now, like decolonial wellness and spiritual practitioners have said that spirituality is just colonization
Whoa.
in a beautiful
Yeah.
mask.
Yeah.
Which I was like, wow, that's deep.
Yeah. 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 And I mean, like you were saying too, I do think that there is so much value on being able to be in spaces with people who look like us, share our identities, you know. I mean, I'm white, obviously, and like I can walk into a space and 9 times out of 10, it's like mostly white people. And, you know, there's not always comfort for me in that, you know, because I'm someone who does, I walk into a room ever since I was a child. I'm like, who's not here right now? You know, why are they not here? Why do they not feel safe enough to be here? Like, makes sense. There's a lot of bullshit happening in wellness spaces that like would feel really unsafe for a lot of people. And again, it's like, you know, but it's also like sharing identities doesn't always mean that we also agree on everything too. You know, like I've been in plenty of like queer spaces where I'm kind of like, I also don't fit in here, you know? So I think it's hard because it takes work, you know, on the person who's looking for support to like really kind of to have the ability to suss out the red flags
Right.
and you know, try to navigate it.
Yeah. For the listeners, I think just bringing more awareness in the areas where, at the intersections of where you do hold privilege and where you don't, and
Mhm.
see how you can um, see how, in which ways are you perpetuating the privileged versus um, not. And
Yeah.
both require work, just different kinds of work.
Yep.
Because obviously, like I hold privilege in certain areas. I'm cisgendered, I'm able-bodied, but I'm oppressed in others. So
Yep.
understanding is the key.
Totally. And if we were all doing that work, you know, like I years ago, I was in this community organizing project and we were doing work with sexual violence and awareness within like different neighborhoods in Brooklyn and Manhattan. And I just remember like we did do this whole thing where it was like we had to sit down and really run through our lives and like where we hold privilege and where we don't. And what's beautiful about that process is that we can find the places where we overlap, you know, too, where it's like, oh, we share this identity or we share this place of oppression. Um, and it also means that like we always have work to do too, you know what I mean? Because it's like we're all like we're all doing this work of holding it all, which again back to like the good and bad binary. It's like if we can hold all of it, that's a more honest, complex way of being in our lives too.
Yeah. That's also something that I've been trying to like deprogram and heal is like the binary way of looking at life and in all different ways, and also explaining to my parents, and I have to be patient with them because they've lived in a different culture and generation where they don't understand non-binary and they don't understand like trans and stuff. So I have to like explain to them like what that
Mm,
all means. And in the meantime, I'm still trying to like unmask my own very binary way of life as well.
yeah.
So it is still a work in progress for me as well.
Yeah, totally. Yeah,
Yeah.
same.
Yeah. But what gives me hope is that, like you said, if we were all doing the work for ourselves, it gives me solace that when I show up, that I'm trying my best for you.
Mm,
Even if I fuck up, even if
mhm.
I say something maybe that is, in my cisgendered heterosexual lens that might offend you, I apologize and I take ownership of that.
Mhm.
I'm going to do better.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah, there's no I don't think there's any harm in the mistake. It's the harm is the refusal to see it
Yeah.
as one or the
Yeah.
continuance of it over and over. You know what I mean? It's like we all make mistakes for sure all the time. And like we need to allow imperfection for sure.
Yeah. So I have two last questions.
Yeah.
So one of them is just silly, just because I want to know. Do you have any favorite plant allies
Oh
that
my
you work
gosh.
with?
So many, so many. Yeah, I'm like a true, you know, I've ever since I was a kid, I was like a plant person. I got to grow gardens as a kid. My grandma is a major plant person, my uncle, my mom. So it's like very much in my family. But I've started working, I wouldn't say started actually. This is where I like forget what year we're in. I'm like, all right, 2 more years have passed. So for many years now, I've worked a lot with poison plants.
Oh,
So
interesting.
these are, plants that are considered poisonous, and, you know, those are the more like mainstream narratives. But oftentimes when you kind of dig a little deeper, you of course learn that like many cultures and traditions have been working with all plants, poisonous and not, for a long time. And it's about the dose. It's not about the plant. So, um, and I'm not suggesting everyone should just go ingest teas of poisonous plants. I think that there's there's a lot that can be done before you get there. So I spent a lot of time with datura. Are you familiar with datura? They're like these big white flowers that bloom at night. um, so it's an incredible plant that, again, lots of cultural traditions working with it as a medicine.
Mhm.
And so it grows, it's happy in like the Southwest. I mean, it grows all over the world, but like warmer climates. So like Mexico, Southwest, South America, um, big, beautiful white blooms that bloom at night. And by the morning, they're wilted and done. And so
Oh,
it's
no
just
way.
like a moment in time. Um, they have the sweetest nectar. Again, I wouldn't recommend just like going out there. I've spent a lot of time with the plant. And it's just like you get like one little drop, and to me it's a cool contrast because they smell incredible, they taste incredible, and they're poisonous. So it's
Wow.
like it's just fun.
Like the poisonous apple.
Yes, exactly. And a lot of poison medicine work is, again, like shadow work. It's about being with the like poisonous parts of ourselves. So a lot of this work can just be done on like an energetic level. It can be done by sitting with a plant, sitting with a drawing of a plant, sitting with like, I make a lot of essences, flower essences of poisonous plants. So for people that don't know, a flower essence is
Mhm.
the energetic imprint of a plant or a space. People do like environmental essences. And it doesn't, when you work with it, you put like just a part of the plant in water. I do it under the sun and the moon for poisonous plants. And then you take it out and you dilute it down. So you're not getting the compounds that are poisonous. You're just getting the like energetic medicine of the plants. So yeah, datura is one I love to work with a lot. Um, Yarrow just popped into my head, so I guess Yarrow wants to hang out.
I like that.
Yarrow, do you know about Yarrow?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
It's ruled by Venus.
Mm,
Mhm.
that makes sense.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's a beautiful plant too. It grows all over. I mean, when I moved here, it grows wild. It can be cultivated, and you can also just find it kind of everywhere. Um, there's the physical elements that allow it to be impactful on our physical and emotional bodies, and then the emotional elements on our emotional bodies. But yeah, great for boundaries, great for like working with some protection medicine. And
Oh no.
so,
Oh, you froze a little bit. You said it's good for boundaries and protection.
and it's, um,
Uh-oh.
oh, there we go. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you, but your video is frozen, but that's
Oh
okay.
no. Okay, let's just give it a second.
The last thing you said was yarrow is great for protection and boundaries.
Yeah, and yarrow is also on an energetic level. It's great for protection and boundaries. I also use it. I have a tincture that I've made of it, and like if I'm ever like bleeding, if I get a cut in the kitchen or like something, from shaving, you just put a little bit of that tincture on and hold it, and it helps stop the bleeding. So there's just a lot of really useful in the moment support.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah,
Any others? I didn't want to cut you off.
that's good for now.
Okay, last question is what are you calling in?
What am I calling in?
Because it's the new moon in Aries in 2 days. So I'm an Aries sun, and I want to,
Mm.
help you cultivate whatever you're calling in.
Ooh. What am I calling in? The first thing that came to mind is I'm working on a new book. Um, and it's a really hard one. I've been working on it for a really long time. So this year I know I'm going to be spending more time just being in the process of editing the book that I put together. And that's just what came through today. But I think in general, I think I'm calling in more creativity because I think the last couple years in this pandemic, I have felt like I have lost access to creativity. I've struggled a lot to write. I've been where I normally just write through traumatic stuff or write about traumatic stuff. I've been like, I do not have accurate words for all of this. So I'm trying to call in more creativity and just like letting it be a foundation of my day to day this year instead of like something that I do when I have time or energy.
Hmm. That's a beautiful intention. That's a
Thanks.
beautiful, um, because it is like the astrological new year, and Aries is a cardinal fire sign. So creativity is like, yeah, I'm supporting you with calling that
Yeah.
in.
Thanks.
If anybody wants to work with you or, um, yeah, just get to know you more, what offerings do you have? How can people contact you, work with you?
Yeah. My website is corpusritual.com. You can find out all kinds of stuff there. There's a lot of resources on there. And yeah, I offer one-on-one virtual breath work. I have a waiting list going right now because I'm moving with just some past and current clients. I also offer a monthly sliding scale breathwork group that's virtual. Um, I'm also an herbalist, so I have like a line of herbal remedies and I work one-on-one with people. And yeah, I have two books. I have that anthology that I always like to talk about just because I think, you know, a lot of people probably would be supported by hearing from other people that share experiences and identities with them. And
Mhm.
that's called Queering Sexual Violence. And then I have a book I wrote about breath work called The Power of Breath Work.
Mhm.
Yeah, so those, oh, and Instagram is Corpus Ritual as well. But yeah, I didn't even really mention it when I was talking about it earlier, but my whole practice is sliding scale, which
Beautiful.
for me is really important in healing arts work. Again, coming back to like access and who has access to spaces. I think that so much of healing work is really out of reach for a lot of people for a lot of reasons. And so one of the ways I try to address it is by offering it on a scale. So people get to determine where they fall, pay according to that, and it feels a little bit more equitable for me.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And if you want to follow Jennifer, who has a beautiful Instagram, you're gonna have to read her captions.
I might just stop writing them, then we'll see. We'll see who the real people are. Maybe they'll. Yeah,
You have a
same.
beautiful Instagram.
Thank you. That's very nice. Yeah, I also mostly like being on the internet, but the last couple of years have really challenged me.
Yeah,
Yeah,
a wild world out there.
really wild.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jennifer, it was such a pleasure to talk to you and get to know you at such an intimate level with our listeners. Thank you so
Mm.
much. You're such
Same. Thank
a
you.
beauty.
And who knew we'd have so much air sign energy?
Oh yeah, I also have a stellium in Libra. So
Same.
yeah, I've got Mars, Pallas Athena, Saturn, and Pluto because I'm an 80s baby.
I am too. I don't remember mine. My girlfriend's an astrologer, so I'm always like, Rose, what's my thing in again? So good to talk to you.
Good to talk to you.